You're staring at stone faces carved from volcanic ash in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 2,200 miles from anything. 900 giant statues, some weigh 80 tons, some stand 33 feet, and nobody can tell you for certain why 300 of them are still stuck in the quarry, half-carved, abandoned mid-creation. Nobody can explain the script carved on 27 wooden tablets that we can't read. Nobody knows exactly when or why every single standing statue got knocked over between 1722 and the late 1800s. Easter Island keeps its secrets. 12 of them still puzzle researchers today, despite 3 centuries of expeditions, drone surveys, radiocarbon dating, and experimental archaeology. These aren't legends. These are documented gaps in what we know. Let's walk through them. If you value documented archaeological history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the PLOS 1 November 2025 study by Carl Lipo, published in the journal that documented 426 Moai through 11,686 drone photographs, and from scientific reports, February 2024, radiocarbon dating study by Silvia Ferrara at the University of Bologna, placing one Rongorongo tablet to 1493 through 1509. Now back to the information. Some are just outlines in bedrock. The largest unfinished one, Te Tokanga, would have stood 69 feet and weighed 270 tons if completed. Carl Lipo's three-dimensional model from January 2024 documented 426 total Moai across 30 distinct workshop zones. Each clan worked their section. Different techniques, different finishing styles. Then it stopped. The question is when exactly and why all zones ceased at once or in sequence. Traditional dating puts the end of carving around 1650, correlating with forest disappearance from pollen records. But some Moai at Rano Raraku show no weathering, suggesting work continued closer to 1700 or even 1722 when Jacob Roggeveen arrived. Roggeveen reported all coastal Moai standing upright in April 1722. By 1770, when the Spanish came, fewer stood. By James Cook's visit in 1774, many had fallen, and Cook noted only 600 to 700 impoverished inhabitants. The timeline compression is brutal. Somewhere between 1650 and 1722, Moai production ended. Peruvian slave raids in 1862 took 1,500 people, decimating the population and killing anyone who could read Rongorongo or remember oral histories. When Eugene Ayrod arrived as a missionary in 1864, he found tablets nobody could read. The knowledge died with the scribes. Was carving already abandoned by 1650 due to ecological limits? Or did it continue until European contact introduced disease? The Moai in the quarry don't answer. They sit tilted, half-born, waiting for carvers who never returned. No primary source documents the moment of abandonment. No decree, no mass grave at the quarry dated to a specific event. Just 300 statues locked in stone, mid-thought. That's the first mystery. Era. By 1650, tree pollen disappears from the sediment record. The dominant species was Jubea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm, which can reach 80 feet and live 600 years. John Flenley's pollen analysis from Rano Raraku in 1984 documented the timeline of deforestation in layers. Early layers showed Toromiro, Hau-Hau, and palm. Middle layers show declining palm with increasing grass pollen, indicating clearing. Top layers show zero tree pollen by 1650. The standard narrative blames humans for cutting trees to move Moai, leading to soil erosion, crop failure, and societal collapse. But Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo challenge this. Their analysis of archaeological deposits shows Polynesian rats, Rattus excellens, arrived with the first settlers around 1200. These rats eat palm seeds. Computer modeling by Hunt, published in American Scientist in 2006, shows a founding population of just 24 rats could reach 2 to 3 million within 3 years, consuming every seed. If rats prevented regeneration, deforestation could happen without human felling. The forest didn't recover because no new palms could grow. Hunt's excavations at Anaquina found rat-gnawed palm nuts in quantity. But here's the mystery. If rats caused deforestation starting around 1200, why does pollen show forests persisting until 1650? That's 450 years. Did humans manage to protect seed stocks for centuries? Were there rat-resistant tree species we haven't identified? The pollen record shows a gradual decline, not a sudden rat-caused crash. Recent soil analysis by Sarah Sherwood at Rano Raraku Quarry, published in Journal of Archaeological. Science, in December 2019, found rich clay soils with taro, banana, and sweet potato residues, suggesting intensive agriculture continued even as trees disappeared. The quarry wasn't just a carving site, but a productive farming zone. The mystery isn't just what happened to the trees, but why the timeline doesn't match the rat model cleanly. Something's missing. How did they really transport 80-ton statues without modern equipment? The walking theory sounds elegant. 2 teams with ropes on either side rocked the statue forward in a waddle. Carl Lipo and Terry Hunt demonstrated this in Hawaii in July 2012 with a 5-ton replica, moving it 100 meters in 40 minutes with 18 people. Physics supports it. The Moai's center of gravity sits forward. Tilt it slightly, and rotational momentum helps. Scale up to 80 tons, and the same mechanics apply. The study, published in Journal of Archaeological Science in 2025, documented forward-leaning designs on Moai across the island supporting vertical transport. Roads 15 feet wide with concave cross-sections would stabilize the rocking motion. Fallen Moai along transport routes lie face up or face down, indicating they fell from standing positions. Fracture patterns match vertical impact stress. But here's what doesn't add up. The largest Moai successfully transported and erected weighs 82 tons and stands 33 feet at Ahu Te Pitokura, Paro, the statue's name. Moving that distance 11.8 miles from Rano Raraku to the southeast coast would require coordinated teams maintaining balance for days. One mistake, and 82 tons hits the ground. The statue breaks. Lipo's model works for smaller Moai, but scaling to Paro's mass introduces problems. How many people? 50? 100? How do you feed and coordinate them across terrain? The concave roads exist, documented by archaeological survey, but not all roads connect all Ahu sites. Some Moai sit at platforms with no clear road path. Did they carve roads we haven't found? Did they move some statues differently? And why are 30 Moai carved from basalt, 22 from trachyte, and 17 from red scoria instead of the standard tuff? These stones are harder, heavier. The basalt Moai can't be walked the same way. Different quarries, different transport methods. We don't have a unified theory that covers all 900 statues. The walking method probably explains most, but not all. The standard theory blames internecine warfare. Clans toppled rival Moai to break their mana, their spiritual power. Oral tradition mentions conflicts. But here's the problem. No mass grave from this period, no battlefield, no weapons cache dated to 1680 through 1780. The war explanation assumes prolonged conflict, but archaeological evidence is thin. An alternative theory suggests European contact triggered collapse. Disease, especially smallpox, arrived with Europeans. By 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui remained from an estimated 3,000 to 15,000 at contact. Mass death could destabilize society fast, but disease doesn't topple statues. People do. Did survivors intentionally destroy Moai in anger at ancestors who failed to protect them from plague? The legend of Nuahine Pikea Uri tells of a woman with powerful mana who toppled statues in rage when her children left her nothing to eat. Is this metaphor for societal breakdown or literal history? Tsunami could topple coastal Ahu. Easter Island sits in a seismically active region. A major quake could generate waves, but not all Ahu are coastal. Inland platforms like Ahu, Akivi, 7 Moai facing the ocean nearly 2 miles from shore. Tsunami doesn't explain those. Recent wildfire damage in October 2023, documented by Lipo's team in January 2024, showed fire can crack and char statues. Could ancient fires during conflict have weakened Moai before they were pushed? We know some Moai fell face forward, others backward. Face forward suggests deliberate toppling to humiliate. Face backward suggests pulling down with ropes. Different methods. Different motives? The timeline is tight. 150 years from standing to fallen. That's fast for gradual decline. Something triggered rapid destruction. We don't have smoking gun evidence of what. The 27 surviving tablets contain over 15,000 glyphs, humans, animals, plants, geometric forms, written in reverse bastrophodon, each line upside down relative to the last. Eugene Ayrwood first documented them in 1864, describing tablets in every hut. By 1870, missionaries had collected most and sent them to Europe. None remain on the island. The glyphs are pictographic. A fish, a bird, a human figure. But what do they say? Thomas Barthel in the 1950s identified 599 distinct signs. Contemporary scholars dispute that count. In 1869, Bishop Florentin Etienne Josen in Tahiti found Matoro Tawa Ure, a Rapa Nui laborer who claimed to read tablets. Josen recorded Matoro's chants. Matoro identified glyphs as porcelain, which translates to cowrie shells, fish, bird. But when researchers compared Matoro's readings of parallel passages, they found inconsistencies. Matoro read the lunar calendar in tablet Mamari backward and failed to recognize the full moon glyph. Either he couldn't actually read it, or Rongorongo isn't true writing, but mnemonic prompts requiring prior knowledge. The breakthrough came February 2024. Silvia Ferrara's team at the University of Bologna radiocarbon dated 4 tablets preserved in Rome. 3 dated to the 18th or 19th century. 1 tablet D, Echancre, dated to 1493 through 1509, over 200 years before Europeans arrived in 1722. That suggests independent invention of writing. Only a handful of cultures invented writing from scratch: Sumerians, Egyptians, Chinese, Mesoamericans. If Rongorongo is truly independent, it's one of history's rarest intellectual achievements. But here's the mystery. If it predates European contact, why does Spanish annexation in 1770 include a treaty signed by chiefs marking upon it certain characters in their own form of script? Did they already have Rongorongo, or were they mimicking European writing they'd just seen? The glyphs don't resemble any European letters. They're clearly indigenous design, but the timing raises questions, and we still can't read them. Portions of tablet Mamari show lunar calendar patterns, but the rest, unknown. Genealogy, navigation, agriculture, chance, we're guessing. The priests who could read Rongorongo died in Peruvian slave raids or from smallpox. The knowledge is gone. The tablets sit in museums in Rome, Santiago, Washington, London, Vienna, silent. The standard theory is that pukao represent top knots, hair tied in a bun, symbolizing mana power. Chiefs wore their hair long and tied up. Hair held spiritual energy. But pukao weren't original. Sean Hickson's study from Penn State University, published in Journal of Archaeological Science in June 2018, used three-dimensional photogrammetry on 50 pukao, and found they were added later, after Moai were already standing. The hypothesis is pukao came into fashion between 1200 and 1500, coinciding with increased competition among clans. Bigger Moai, more elaborate ahu, taller statues with hats to outdo rivals. But here's what's unexplained. Why red? Punapau quarry was considered sacred. Red scoria symbolizes spiritual strength in Rapa Nui culture, but why only some Moai? Were they for specific chiefs or specific clans? Ahu Tongariki has 15 Moai. Only a few have pukao. Ahu Tahai has 3 Moai, only one with a pukao. Ahu Nau Nau at Anakena has 7 Moai, multiple with pukao. The distribution isn't random, but the logic isn't clear. Did some clans have access to Punapau and others didn't? Or were pukao reserved for the most powerful ancestors? Hickson's team showed pukao were rolled to the Moai as cylinders, then modified on site. Indentations on the bases support parbuckling, a rope technique to roll heavy objects up ramps. The ramps were then removed, and the Moai's base was carved flat so it stood upright with the pukao balanced on top. 15 workers could move the largest pukao. Efficient, but it required coordination. If only 100 Moai merited this effort, those must have been special. We don't know the selection criteria. And 70 pukao still sit at Punapau, never transported. Did carving stop before they could be placed? Or were they carved in advance and demand dried up? The mystery isn't how they did it. The mystery is why only some qualified. In 1978, archaeologist Sonia Hawa found the first complete Moai eye at Ahu Nau Nau during restoration. White coral with a slot for a red scoria, or black obsidian pupil. It fit perfectly in a Moai eye socket. 6 more eyes were found at the same site. Later expeditions found fragments scattered at other ahu. The breakthrough realization was that Moai weren't always blind. The deep elliptical eye sockets were carved to hold these eyes. When the eyes were placed, the Moai became aringa ora, living faces. The eyes gave the statue mana. Without eyes, the Moai were incomplete, powerless. Sergio Rapuhawa's discovery in 1979 confirmed this through elder testimony. Jose Fati and Leonardo Paccarati, oral tradition keepers, swore they'd seen eye fragments before. But here's the mystery. If there are 900 Moai, and eyes were essential to activate them, where are the other 893 sets of eyes? Only one complete eye survives. A handful of fragments. That's it. Coral is durable. It should preserve. Were the eyes deliberately removed and destroyed when Moai were toppled? If so, why? Breaking mana? Defiling ancestors? Or were eyes only placed on a select few Moai, the most sacred ones? If so, which ones and why? The Moai at Ahu Nau Nau were buried under sand for centuries, which preserved them. Moai left exposed suffered weathering. But coral fragments should still appear in excavations around fallen Moai. They don't, not in sufficient quantity. Did they use perishable materials for some eyes? Wood? Painted bark? That would explain the absence, but contradicts the coral evidence. Another possibility is that eyes were temporary, installed only for ceremonies. After the ceremony, they were removed and stored. When Europeans arrived and society collapsed, the storage sites were lost or looted. But this is speculation. We have one complete eye. We have 900 Moai. The math doesn't work. Nobody documented eyes on standing Moai in early European accounts. Roggeveen in 1722 described Moai, but didn't mention eyes. Did he miss them? Or were they already missing by then? If Moai stood without eyes from 1650 onward, that undermines the idea that eyes were essential. unless the society had already fragmented by then, and nobody performed the eye ceremony anymore. The mystery is the absence. The conventional explanation is that most Moai face inland to watch over the villages, ancestors protecting the living. Ahu Akivi sits inland, 1.2 miles from the coast. Its 7 Moai face west, toward the ocean. The theory is they represent the 7 scouts sent by King Hotu Matua to find the island. Oral tradition says scouts landed at Anakina, waited for the king. These 7 face their homeland, Polynesia, to the west. It's poetic. It fits the legend. But here's the problem. Astronomical alignment researchers note that Ahu Akivi's Moai align with the equinox. On spring and autumn equinoxes, they face directly into the sunset. Coincidence or intentional? If intentional, that implies sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Other Ahu don't show clear alignments. Why would Ahu Akivi be different? And if the 7 scout story is true, why aren't there other Ahu dedicated to scouts elsewhere? The first settler story is foundational, yet only this one site represents it. Another issue is dating. Ahu Akivi was restored in the 1960s by William Malloy. The original placement of the Moai was reconstructed. Could Malloy have introduced error? The alignment might be accidental, or it might be real. The inland location is unusual. Most Ahu are coastal. Ahu Akivi sits on a hillside with clear sightlines. If the Moai represent navigators, facing the sea makes sense. But if they were chiefs or ancestors, inland positioning would match the pattern elsewhere. We can't carbon date stone. We can date the Ahu platform through charcoal in the fill, which places construction between 1300 and 1600. That's broad. The Moai themselves could have been carved earlier or later. Without precise dating, we're left with oral tradition, which is valuable but not definitive. The 7 Scout story could be myth explaining the site's unusual orientation after the fact, or it could be historical truth preserved through generations. The mystery is distinguishing legend from documented fact. What caused the sudden population collapse from thousands to hundreds in less than a century? Jacob Roggeveen's crew in April 1722 estimated 2,000 to 3,000 inhabitants. The Spanish in March 1770 estimated 3,000. James Cook in March 1774 counted 600 to 700 and noted poverty. By 1862, 1,500 were abducted to Peru as slaves. By 1877, 111 remained. The math is devastating. In 155 years, the population dropped 95%. What happened? Disease is the obvious culprit. Europeans brought smallpox, tuberculosis, syphilis. Isolated populations have no immunity. A single sick sailor could trigger epidemic, but disease alone doesn't explain the timeline. Roggeveen's visit was brief, no prolonged contact. The Spanish spent 6 days. Cook spent 4 days. These weren't colonization missions, they were brief landings. How did disease spread so fast? One theory is that whalers and sealers visited between documented expeditions. Ships stopped for water, undocumented contact, germs spread. But ship logs from the period are sparse, we can't confirm this. The Peruvian slave raid in December 1862 is documented. Approximately 1,500 Rapa Nui were taken. Most died in Peru. Under international pressure, Peru returned 15. Smallpox infected the returnees. They brought the disease back. By 1877, smallpox had killed nearly everyone. That sequence is clear. But the decline started before 1862. Cook's count of 600 to 700 in 1774 means the population had already crashed from this Spanish estimate of 3,000 just 4 years earlier. What killed 2,400 people between 1770 and 1774? Famine? Fighting? Disease from the Spanish visit? We don't have burial grounds that large. No mass graves dated to this period. Skeletal analysis by Douglas Owsley shows evidence of nutritional stress and violent trauma in some remains, suggesting conflict. But not enough to account for rapid depopulation. The mystery is the missing dead. Where did they go? Were bodies cremated? Buried at sea? Did survivors leave the island? There's no evidence of mass emigration, no oral tradition of escape fleets. They stayed. They died. But the archaeological record doesn't show where. The standard explanation is that carving stopped suddenly, leaving statues unfinished. But that assumes all 394 were intended to be moved. What if some were meant to stay? Joanne Van Tilburg's analysis, published in Journal of Archaeological Science in December 2019, suggests Rano Raraku wasn't just a quarry. Soil samples from the inner quarry show rich clay, banana, taro, sweet potato. The site was a productive agricultural zone. Moai standing in the quarry might have been placed there intentionally to enhance soil fertility. The belief was that Moai produced agricultural abundance. Statues in the quarry would bless the crops. This contradicts the abandoned mid-carving narrative. If Moai were deliberately left standing, that changes the interpretation. But not all quarry Moai are finished. Many are clearly half-carved. Faces outlined. No detail. These weren't placed for agriculture. They are legitimately unfinished. So the quarry contains both finished statues intentionally placed and unfinished statues abandoned mid-work. How do we distinguish them? The three-dimensional model by Lipo's team documented in PLOS 1 November 2025 shows variation. Some moai stand fully detached from bedrock, partially buried. Others remain attached by a keel along the back, frozen mid-extraction. The attached ones are clearly unfinished. The detached ones, less clear. Did carvers finish them, stand them up, and leave them? Or did they intend to transport them but stopped? Without documentation from the time, we're guessing. And here's another angle. If 30 workshops operated independently, maybe some finished their moai and left them while others were still. Carving. Decentralized production means uneven progress. One clan completes 50 statues, another completes 20. When work stops, the distribution is uneven. That could explain the mix of finished and unfinished. The mystery is intentionality. Which moai were meant to stay, which were meant to move, we can't tell. When moai were excavated, archaeologists found rock art, petroglyphs carved on their backs, spirals, anthropomorphic figures, symbols. Not all moai have them, just a few. The carvings are faint, weathered. Christian Arevalo Pacarati documented petroglyphs on moai 156 and 157 at Rano Raraku. Von Tilburg's team excavated them over 5 years and found the petroglyphs were applied after the moai was partially buried. The red dashed line in excavation diagrams shows the estimated surface level when the art was carved. That means carvers came back later, after the moai was standing and partially covered by sediment, and added the petroglyphs. Why? The symbols include designs associated with the Birdman cult, which replaced moai worship sometime after 1680. The Birdman cult focused on the god Make and an annual competition at Orongo village. Winners gained political power. If petroglyphs were added during the Birdman period, that suggests moai remained significant even as the focus shifted. They weren't forgotten. They were recontextualized. But why carve on the back? Backs face away from the village. Who would see them? Unless the petroglyphs weren't for human eyes. Maybe they were messages to the ancestors, the spirits embodied in the moai. Or maybe they recorded events. Some petroglyphs resemble canoes, suggesting voyages. Others look like turtles, fish, birds, ecological references, or mythological. The problem is we can't decode them. Petroglyph analysis is subjective. One researcher sees a canoe, another sees a geometric pattern. Context matters. The moai at Orongo village, Hoa Hakananaya, now in the British Museum, has Birdman carvings on its back. Those are clearly linked to the cult. But the symbols on quarry moai don't match. Different iconography, different meaning, or same meaning, different artistic style. We have 4,000 petroglyphs cataloged across Easter Island. Some are 20 feet tall, some are tiny, some are painted red and white, most are unpainted. The backs of moai are just one context. Without Rongorongo decipherment or surviving oral tradition explaining specific symbols, we're stuck with pattern. Analysis. Spirals might represent the cosmos. Anthropomorphic figures might be ancestors. Or they might be something else entirely. The mystery is meaning. On wood from a tree felled between 1493 and 1509. That's over 200 years before Europeans arrived. If the wood is that old, and the script was carved around the same time, Rongorongo existed long before contact. That makes it an independent invention. But if Rongorongo was in use from the 1490s onward, why didn't earlier European visitors mention it? Roggeveen, into 1722, spent 5 days. He noted moai, people praying, basic customs, no mention of writing. The Spanish in 1770 spent 6 days. They had Rapa Nui chiefs sign a treaty. The chiefs marked upon it certain characters in their own form of script. That's the first documented reference. But is that Rongorongo, or just marks? The signing ceremony involved a treaty of annexation. The chiefs didn't read or write Spanish. They made symbolic marks. Could that have inspired Rongorongo? The glyphs don't look like European letters. They're pictographic. Animals, plants, humans. Completely different visual language. If the Spanish contact inspired Rongorongo, the development happened incredibly fast. Between March 1770 and Eugene Ayraud's arrival in January 1864, 94 years, the script developed, spread, and became entrenched enough that tablets existed in every hut. That's a tight timeline. The alternative is that Rongorongo existed before European contact but was kept secret. Oral tradition says only priests and ruling families could read it. Tablets were sacred, taboo. Maybe Roggeveen and Cook never saw them because they weren't shown. The visits were brief. Trust was low. Why would islanders reveal sacred objects to strangers? That explanation fits the 1490 wood date. But here's the complication. The wood is from Podocarpus latifolia, a species native to southeastern Africa, not Rapa Nui. The researchers hypothesized the wood came from driftwood, possibly a European shipwreck that washed ashore. Medieval and Renaissance European ships used podocarpus for masts. If a ship wrecked centuries before documented European contact, driftwood could drift for decades across currents and wash up on Easter Island. That fits, but it introduces uncertainty. If the wood was carved long after it washed ashore, the tablet could be younger than the wood. Radiocarbon dates the tree, not the inscription. Without direct dating of the glyphs, we can't be certain. The 3 other tablets Ferrara tested dated to the 18th and 19th centuries. Most Rongorongo probably dates to that period. Tablet D might be an outlier, a special object made on ancient wood, or it might prove the script is older. We need to test all 27 tablets. Until then, the 1490 date is tantalizing but not conclusive. The mystery is whether Rongorongo is pre-contact or post-contact. If pre-contact, it's one of humanity's rarest achievements. If post-contact, it's still impressive but not independent. The distinction matters. Why did chickens play such a central role in the economy when other Polynesian islands relied more heavily on fishing? Why do some Moai have 3-fingered hands while others have 4 or 5? But these 12 represent the core unresolved questions about the Moai themselves. The statues, everyone recognizes worldwide, but nobody fully understands. The faces that have stared from countless photographs and documentaries for a century, becoming icons of mystery tourism, symbols of human ambition, warnings about ecological collapse depending on who's telling the story. But strip away the narratives, and you're left with stone and absence. 900 statues, 400 years of carving, 300 years of outside attention. And still, fundamental questions remain unanswered. 3 centuries of research have answered many questions. The walking method for transport works. Lipo's experiments proved physics supports vertical movement. The pukao used parbuckling, a technique documented in ship salvage operations. The quarry shows decentralized production, 30 separate zones with distinct techniques. The soils at Rano Raraku support intensive agriculture. The coral eyes were real, discovered by Sonia Hawa in 1978. The Rongorongo script exists on 27 wooden objects now scattered across global institutions. The Moai were representations of deified ancestors, a ringa or a atatapuna, living faces that carried mana and protected communities. We know the toki chisels were made from Hawaiiite quarried at Rua Toki Toki. We know carving methods involved working from the top down. We know platform construction involved massive stone walls fitted precisely without mortar. We know the pukao came from Punapau. We know Moai were painted because Hoa Hakananaya showed paint until 1868. But the gaps remain. Why carving stopped? What Rongorongo says, where the eyes went, why every Moai fell. These aren't trivial gaps. They're foundational to understanding who the Rapa Nui were and what they built. And the clock is ticking. Wildfire in October 2023 damaged statues at Rano Raraku, charring and cracking stone that had survived centuries. Pedro Edmonds Pawa, mayor of Rapa Nui, stated the fire was started intentionally, though other authorities believed it was accidental. Either way, 150 to 250 acres burned. Moai that had stood or lain in place for 500 years showed heat damage. Tough is soft stone, compressed volcanic ash. Heat makes it brittle. Cracks form. Faces erode. The damage is irreparable according to some assessments. Climate change brings more fires, longer droughts, stronger winds that spread flames faster. The island is mostly grassland now, dry fuel, more erosion, rain washing away protective soil layers. Seawater intrusion threatens coastal Ahu. Rising sea levels mean higher storm surges. Ahu Tongariki, the largest platform with 15 Moai, sits barely above sea level. In 2080, seasonal waves could reach the statues according to projections published in environmental impact studies. Salt spray corrodes stone. Wave action undermines foundations. The Ahu could collapse. Tourism brings wear. Over 100,000 visitors per year before the pandemic. Feet on platforms, hands on stone. Photography lighting, vibrations from vehicles. Each individual impact is minor. Cumulatively, they degrade. The statues won't last forever. Neither will the archaeological context around them. Every year without answers is a year closer to permanent loss. Every elder who dies without recording oral history is a voice silenced. Every tablet that remains undated is a potential mystery deepened. The urgency is real, not theoretical, not distant future, now. In November 2025, Lipo's team published the most detailed 3-dimensional documentation of Rano Raraku ever made. 11,686 drone images. Centimeter resolution, 426 Moai mapped, 30 workshops identified. The model is publicly accessible online. Anyone can explore the quarry virtually. That's preservation. Digital immortality if the physical site fails. But even the best model can't answer why. It can't tell us what Matoro was thinking when he recited tablet chants to Bishop Jausen in 1869. It can't explain why Moai 157 has spirals on its back. It can't decode Rongorongo. Technology documents, humans interpret. And interpretation requires context we've lost. The Moai stand, restored now on platforms rebuilt by archaeologists William Molloy and Gonzalo Figueroa in the 1950s and 60s. They face inland again as they did in 1722, eyes without eyes, sockets empty of coral, watching over an island that's changed beyond recognition from when they were carved. The Rapa Nui people today number around 6,000, living under Chilean sovereignty since 1888, when Chile annexed the island on September 9th. They fight for autonomy, for control of their heritage sites, through the Mau Henua Indigenous Community Organization established to manage Rapa Nui National Park. They fight for recognition, for the return of artifacts taken without permission. The Moai belong to them, not to museums in London where Hoa Hakananaya sits in the British Museum Great Court under fluorescent lighting. Not to Rome, where 4 Rongorongo tablets remain in Congregazione dei Sacri Cuori di Gesù e di Maria. Not to Santiago, where more tablets sit in Museo Nacional de Historia Natural. Not to Washington, where the Smithsonian holds Rongorongo fragments. Not to Vienna or St. Petersburg or private collections. To the descendants of the carvers, the people who maintain traditions, who perform ceremonies, who remember what the tablets mean, even if they can't read the glyphs. And maybe that's the 13th mystery. Not archaeological, but moral, ethical, legal, political, all at once. How do we honor the past when the past's owners were dispossessed? The Rapa Nui didn't consent to British sailors taking Hoa Hakananaya in November 1868. They didn't consent to Routledge's expedition removing tablets. They didn't consent to Thor Heyerdahl's excavations moving objects to Oslo. How do we study history without extracting it, commodifying it, turning sacred objects into museum pieces behind glass? The Moai were carved to embody ancestors, to give them presence, physical form, tangible connection between the living and the dead, to make them real, Aringa Ora, living faces that could see, that could protect, that could produce agricultural fertility through their mana. When we take tablets to Europe, when we move statues to museums, when we document without permission, when we publish studies without consulting source communities, when we profit from heritage that isn't ours, we're breaking that connection. The University of Bologna team that dated tablet D. Echancre worked with Rapa Nui community members. They acknowledged indigenous knowledge, cited Rapa Nui scholars like Gina Pacarati as co-authors. They sought consent before testing. They shared results with the community before publication. That's new, relatively new. For centuries, researchers took what they wanted. Captain Cook's crew took artifacts as curiosities. HMS Topazi crew took Hoa Hakananaya as a gift for Queen Victoria, though nobody with authority to give that gift was consulted. Norwegian expeditions in the 1950s removed objects for study. Some were returned. Many weren't. The Rapa Nui people want Hoa Hakananaya back. The British Museum says it's safer there, better conserved, accessible to global audiences. That's the museum's argument. Safer from what? From the people who made it? From the island that birthed it? From the context that gives it meaning? The British Museum points to wildfire damage, to lack of climate-controlled facilities on the island, to political instability. The Rapa Nui people point to centuries of care, to ongoing stewardship, to the fact that statues left on the island survived 500 years before Europeans arrived. The debate continues at the highest levels. UNESCO weighs in, Chile supports repatriation, Britain resists, and while it does, while lawyers and diplomats argue ownership and international law and cultural heritage conventions and repatriation claims, the mysteries remain. And while it does, the mysteries remain. 12 documented gaps in our understanding. 12 questions that 300 years of exploration, excavation, analysis, and comprehensive documentation still haven't fully answered. Easter Island keeps its secrets.